Hi folks, welcome to my channel. It's been a while since I've done a full-blown video. It's over 2.5 months, going on for 3 months. I'm afraid it's not really been a great time. 2023 has started in very much the same way that 2022 ended. And to be honest, I haven't really therefore been in the mood to do any videos. But more importantly, apologies, because I've not really even been in the mood to watch some of my favourite YouTubers. So, I'm hoping this week to get round to catching up with all your videos, see what you've all been buying, and hopefully I'll comment on a few of those videos. Anyway, despite not really being in the mood to make videos, it hasn't stopped me buying. In the last couple of months, we've had 3 record fairs. 2 in February, 1 at Windermere and 1 at Kendal, and then just the other week, another one at Windermere. So I've came away from those with a few records. So let's start with the first Windermere record fair. I've probably said this in the past, but Windermere is just a small fair. It's basically just one guy. So it can be hit or miss. This time, unfortunately, it was a bit of a miss, and I came away with only 2 records. That's a record for me. I've never bought so few at a record fair. But let's see what I got. First up was this album from 1974 by McGee. You'll all be aware that McGee is Paul McCartney's brother. He changed his name in order to not be seen as hanging on the coattails of his brother's success. But in fact, he got a couple of number ones in England with his band, The Scaffold. When The Scaffold folded, he created a band called, I think, Grims. I've never heard them, but they didn't last long. But in 1974, Paul decided he would like to help out his brother with an album. Paul had just finished recording Band on the Run. And so they did this album together. Basically, virtually all the tracks are written or co-written between McCartney and McGee. Paul produced the album, and members of Wings like Linda, Denny Lane, Jimmy McCulloch play on it. Paul and Linda, and Paul himself plays on it though uncredited. Paul and Linda go under the name of Paul and Linda McGee for this album. This is I really enjoyed this album. It's very good. It's very much a long lost sort of Wings album, as you can tell from the fact that Paul wrote it, or co-wrote it, and a lot of the Wings musicians played on it. Very much in that, probably the style of Red Rose Speedway, but enjoyable. The only other one I bought was an album that John, Mr. Baggy Hi-Fi, mentioned in a video that he did the week before, I think, the Windermere Record Fair, about Joe Meek, and he mentioned this album called I Hear a New World, an outer space music fantasy. This was 1960 it was recorded, but this is a 1991 reissue on RPM. I've only listened to this once. I need to live with it a bit longer. It is a bit of a strange record, as that's what he says it was meant to be in the liner notes. There is just a couple of problems with it. One is on a couple of tracks, he has these sort of chipmunk style vocals, which I really could have done without. But the other problem goes to what he says here, just reading from the liner notes of Joe Meeks. At first I was going to make a record with music that was completely out of this world, but realised that it would have very little entertainment value. So I kept the construction of the music down to earth and wrote tunes that I hope you will grow to like. And I think that's the problem for me. I wish he'd stayed with his original vision of making a record that was out of this world. I think that would have appealed more to me. It's like, but I did enjoy it. I think it's good, and like I say, I've only listened to it once. I really need to live with it a bit longer to see if it grows more on me. So those were the only two records I got at Windermere. The following week was the Kendal record fair. Unfortunately, the main guy was off sick, so I didn't get anything from him, which I usually do because he gives me the biggest discounts. But I picked up 1, 2, 3, 4, half a dozen albums. First up, the James Gang's debut album on ABC from, I think, 69, I think this was originally released. The James Gang being famous for the inclusion, obviously, on guitar of Joe Walsh. And this album I really thoroughly enjoyed. I thought this was excellent. Obviously, Joe Walsh gets a lot of the attention because of his guitar playing, but the other two members are superb too. Tom Chris's bass playing is excellent, and particularly I enjoyed Jim Fox's drumming on this album. Excellent album. Next up, the band Argent with what I think was their fourth album, In Deep. I've always been a fan of Argent. They're a bit of a schizophrenic group in that the two main guys were Russ Ballard and Rod Argent. And there was this sort of dichotomy between Russ Ballard's more pop rock stylings and Argent's more progressive styles. But when they work really well. This is the album with the hit single God Gave Rock and Roll to You on it, the long version. Side 1 is particularly good, and the first 3 songs, which are all ballad numbers, are my favourites. God Gave Rock and Roll to You, and It's Only Money Part 1 and Part 2. Really enjoyable album. Next, we have Griffin with their 5th album, Treason. This was also their final album of the 70s before they recently reformed. Unfortunately, Griffin, like a lot of bands do, when a band has a particular unique style, they tend to, over time, drop that style and become less unique. Griffin were obviously had that medieval folk style of music from their early days, which they carried forward even as they got more progressive. with the use of crumb horns and other ancient instruments. But by the time of this album, that had disappeared to a large degree. We still had original members like Richard Harvey, who was the keyboardist and played recorder. Dave Alberley, who I think was the original drummer, but on this album he'd become just the lead vocalist and percussionist. And Brian Gulland, who was the guy that used to play all the crumb horns. On here he plays bassoon, English horn and recorders. The crumb horns have gone, unfortunately. And you get three newer members: Bob Foster on guitars, Jonathan Davey on bass, and Alex Baird on drums. It's a long while since I've heard this. I didn't have high hopes for it, but to be honest, I really enjoyed this. Particularly side one. Side two falls off a bit, but side one is excellent, particularly the opening longest track on the album, Spring Song by Richard Harvey, which is a great progressive number. So I enjoyed this far more than I expected to. Next, an album I've been after for a long while, because I love minimalist music from musicians like Philip Glass and Steve Reich, and this is another of my favourites, Terry Riley, with what is probably, along with Rainbow and Curved Air, his most famous album, In C. This is on Columbia from, doesn't tell me the recording, 1964. The score was written, don't know when the album was recorded. Obviously not to everybody's taste, minimalist music with that repetition, sparseness, but I love that style of music, and I've been wanting to get a copy of this album for a long time, so I was really pleased to pick it up. The next one I probably should have left for last. That's the best pickup of the last couple of months, and this is Armand Duel's album Paradis Varts Duel. Now, Armand Duel started out as a sort of hippie commune. Eventually the musicians in the commune split off and formed Armand Duel 2. The remaining members of the commune put out an album that was just basically an unfocused jam, and then a couple of other albums from that jam were also released. But this was their second album, 3 long tracks, and this is definitely their best album and their most focused, very much in a sort of psychedelic folk sort of jamming sort of style. Great krautrock album. Now, I've been looking for this for ages, but the reason that this was such a great pickup is this is an original copy as far as I can tell. I looked it up on Discogs, and this goes for from anything from, I think I saw £115 to £215. I got it for a tenner. And it was from a guy who usually knows his stuff, and so I'm still a bit wary as to whether this is what I think it is. Never mind, I mean, the music's great, but if this is an original like I strongly think it is, then this is an absolute bargain. And finally, from Kendal, I've had to just pick up this album. I love horror fiction. I read a lot. And this is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, as read by the great Welsh actor James Mason, who has a brilliant voice. This is obviously not the whole book, it's abridged, but it's about an hour's worth of narration. The liner notes are done by Isaac Asimov, as Frankenstein was probably the very first science fiction novel to ever be written. And I love that cover, I must admit. It's by the artist Leonard Baskin. It's called The Frightened Man. It's a bit scratchy, this record, I must admit, but it's great stuff. That was Kendal. Then the other weekend was the second Windermere fair of the year, and this one was a lot better than the first, in that I think the guy had bought a collection a couple of weeks before, so there was far more of interest. And I think the half dozen or so albums I bought all came from that collection. So first off, I picked up Bloodwind Pig's first album, A Head Rings Out. Bloodwind Pig being Mick Abrams' band after he left Jethro Tull after their first album, in order to follow his love of blues. So this is obviously blues rock. Great album from what I remember of it. It's a long time since I've heard it. It's Mick Abrams on guitar, Jack Lancaster on saxes, Andy Pyle on bass, and Ron Berg on drums. Like I say, excellent album. Always hated that cover though. And I also picked up their second album, Get Into This. This is one I've not heard, but I would imagine is very much in the same vein. Bear with me. First album was on Island, the second album is on Chrysalis. I then managed to find this album by a band called Men of Lake, and it's they are an Italian prog band from the 90s. I think they did 2 or 3 albums back in the 90s. This is on Musea, the French label. By all accounts, they're sort of organ-led prog with hints of early King Crimson, a bit of Procol Harum and Moody's, and even a bit of Van der Graaf, so I hear. They sing in English, so I'm looking forward to giving this a listen. Unfortunately, it's got this blue pen mark down there. I don't know why, but not a band I've come across before. The next one I was really pleased to find, because I've been looking for a copy of this, and this is, you're going to get glare on here, this is the album Escalator Over the Hill by Carla Bley, on the JCOA Records label, which is Jazz Composers Orchestras Association or something. It's a 3 album set. You get a little sheet about the label and a fold-up sheet about the association. Then you get a really nice booklet on the album. There's the lady herself, Carla Bley. All the it's credited to Carla Bley and Paul Haynes. Paul Haynes is responsible for the lyrics on the album. You get a lot about it. There's over 100 musicians appear on this album, but including some very big names. like John McLaughlin, Jack Bruce. You even get Paul Jones and Linda Ronstadt doing some of the vocals. Get Michael Mantler, Enrico Rava, some Paul Motion. I've been looking for this for a long time. This is a mixture of big band jazz with avant-garde jazz, jazz fusion, and I've heard it described as jazz in opposition times, in reference to the rock in opposition movement of artists like Henry Cow and Art Bears. But I was so pleased to get this, and for a really good price as well. And sticking with the jazz theme for the last two albums, one of the jazz musicians I've really enjoyed his work is John Sermon, the saxophonist, the British saxophonist, and I've got 2 or 3 albums by him. And this is a live album he did with Stu Martin, the drummer, live at Woodstock Town Hall. This is on the Dawn label, which was Pie's sort of progressive imprint. Stu Martin on here, as well as playing drums, also plays synthesizers, and John Sermon plays soprano sax and baritone sax and bass clarinet. Now this could be a bit of a stretch. I've not listened to it yet. This could be very avant-garde, free jazzish, being only the 2 of them live. But I thought it was worth giving it a chance. I've got some other free jazz albums that I really enjoy. So, and like I say, I've enjoyed John Sermon's work in the past that I've heard. So I thought that was worth picking up. The next one I was really pleased to get, and that is the album Morning Glory, which is the name of the album and the name of the band. Now I've always thought of this as a John Sermon album, as he's the leader of the band. There you go. And this is another live album from 1973 on the Island label. Now, some great musicians on here, as well as Sermon himself on sax. You get the great John Marshall on drums of Soft Machine fame. You get the excellent Norwegian guitarist Terje Repdal. You get John Taylor on piano and electric piano. Chris Lawrence, I can't speak today. Chris Lawrence on acoustic bass, and Malcolm Griffiths on trombone. This is sort of, again, avant-garde jazz, bit of jazz fusion, but very accessible actually, I found. I really enjoy this album. I first came across it around 15 years ago, when I bought this book, Innovations in British Jazz, Volume 1, 1960 to 1980. And it came with a free CD, which was this album. Anybody who's into British jazz of that period, 60s and 70s, I highly recommend this book. It's excellent. It covers not only the early jazzers, but goes into bands like Soft Machine, Nucleus, and others. Highly recommended. I've just noticed as well that the album is engineered by Robin Sylvester. Robin Sylvester engineered a lot of albums in that early 70s. I think he did some Caravan albums, but I came across him as the bassist in Bob Weir's band Rat Dog when they toured over here in about 2003. Met him, he was a really nice guy. Sadly passed away not so long ago. Anyway, that is my hauls from the record fairs recently. There's another Kendal one at Easter. Hopefully you'll get to. I've been buying loads of other stuff as well, which I need to get around to showing. Anyway, I hope it's not as long till my next video. I hope you're all doing okay, and hope to catch up, as I said, with all your videos as well. Take care. All the best.